Hi, I'm Gaza, and welcome to Easy Mode. I'm a casual gamer through and through. I don't like competition in my games, and I prefer working with players against AI rather than against other players for an objective. Except for Team Fortress 2. Ironically, I rarely play MVM and prefer public servers because the average pub dweller is as casual as they come, with servers frequently turning into dance parties where groups of obese Russian men throw sandwiches at each other. Easy Mode is a series idea I've had for a while, where I review games with the casual crowd in mind. Not judging them by a rubric of challenge, but rather if a game is fun enough to be worth your time. This started when I noticed that most game reviewers tend to be pretty hardcore and focused on challenge, always playing on high difficulties. Not to say I'm against challenging yourself with a tough game. I've played Monster Hunter World for way too long, and sank many hours into Overwatch during my high school days. That was until they nerfed Roadhog into a shell of his former self. Anyway, I used to be god-awful at most video games, but I've challenged myself many times and made efforts to improve my capabilities so I could enjoy more games with my friends. When Doom 2016 came out, a buddy had to persuade me to try it because I thought it would be too difficult for me to enjoy, and I didn't want to spend money on a game I wouldn't play. I love Doom 2016 now. I can play it no problem on normal mode, but on easy it definitely falls under mindless power fantasy, my favorite kind of game. How could I know that when every review I look up is telling me that it's so hard it'll melt my eyeballs and turn my intestines into paste? The info that was out there at the time painted it as a ridiculously hard game I wouldn't have the skill to play, and that was the turning point where I felt I needed to make videos that focus on gamers that are just looking for a good time. To tell people that Doom on easy mode is pretty fun, and can be enjoyed by most people at any skill level. Some people, including myself, want a backlog of games where they don't have to think while they play, where they do something that looks cool and it just works. My mindset is, if it's not fun, why bother, especially when it comes to video games. Some people find challenging games fun, and that's not a bad thing. It's incredible watching what someone is capable of once they've mastered a game. So if you like pure, simple fun, then this series is dedicated to you. But if you like your game set on run your face through the dirt difficulty, you probably won't get much out of this. But stick around anyway. Maybe I can help curb your habit of virtual self-harm and maybe make you chuckle a little bit while we're at it. I've wanted to make this series for a long time, and I finally have the technology to do so. Without further ado, let's get on with the review. I'll be covering a game that recently got a third installment, but doesn't get a lot of attention itself. Shadow Warrior 2013. The Shadow Warrior reboot, made by Polish studio Flying Wild Hog and published by Devolver Digital, hit the FPS market to an astounding... Most reviews I saw at the time were positive, but about a year after it was released, everybody just seemed to forget about it. At least most people did. I was so excited for the game, looked up playthroughs after it released, because I had no hope of getting an Xbox One at the time, and still completely forgot about it somehow. I actually rediscovered this game after downloading Shadow Warrior 2 on Game Pass back in 2019. I played the shit out of that game and wanted more, so I got curious about what the first game was like. After looking up a trailer on YouTube, the vague memories of a funny ninja and his ghostly sidekick came back to me. After saving up some money, I bought it on Xbox, and after beating it, it boggles my fucking mind how a game like this could be forgotten. Because it's one of the best games I've ever played.
You got Wang.
You play as Lo Wang, voiced by Jason Liebrecht, well known for his role as Mordecai in the Borderlands series. I think he does well. His performance always seems genuine. He sounds like he's having as much fun playing the character as Wang does when he's killing demons.
Let's see, he lives in Akabari Heights, drinks 4 roses bourbon, neat, collects comic books, and works for Orochizilla?
Wang is a wisecracking assassin, sentient dick joke, and lackey to one Orochizilla, the villain of the original game, now voiced by Eugene Lee from NYPD Blue. Since this is a reboot, Wang is quite a lot younger than his previous iteration. Zilla was only seen in a mech suit in the original game as far as I know, so in this one he's an old dude in a wheelchair, for now at least.
It is written that no human tongue can pronounce a demon's name.
Try me.
All right, my name is Hoji.
Comedian and actor Alex DeBranco, who seems to mostly do obscure low-budget projects, is the voice of Hoji. He was what people remembered the most about the game. His distinct design is what jogged my memory of it. His voice fits the character perfectly, and his line delivery is top-notch the whole way through.
Hoji.
But it's impossible. How did... You must be the one that the prophecy spoke of.
Really? What else does the prophecy say?
Why, that the one will also believe any goddamn idiot thing you make up on the spot.
Get out of my car.
The voice work, mixed with the ethereal and Harlequin-esque mocap for his animations, really breathes some life into the character. Hoji also tends to be a bit of a smartass, usually clashing hilariously with Wang's huge ego.
All right, weird mannequin, ghost, robot thing. Time to dance.
Did you want that to sound tough? It didn't.
Did you want that to sound annoying? Nailed it.
Thank you.
Who's Enra?
Ruler of the ancients. The cock that got me banished.
Enra is the secondary villain played by Nicholas Sainz, who played Green Lantern in DC Universe Online. Sainz pulls a good performance, but Enra as a villain is pretty underwhelming. Barely says or does anything to directly pose a threat to the player until you meet him at the end, but, you know, he's there, I guess. An alternate dimension called the Shadow Realm is home to 6 gods called the Ancients. Gozu, the Executioner, Mezu, the Guardian, Zing, the General, Hoji, the Blacksmith, and Amiona, who's sort of like a rain goddess. She's named after a yokai that causes storms. Enra is the ruler of the Shadow Planes, and the voice you hear in the opening monologue. Enra banished Hoji from the Shadow Realm 200 years ago, leaving him on Earth as a ghostly entity unable to interact with the world unless he bonds with a mortal. He finds one by the name of Mizuyaki, who happens to possess a sword called the Nobitsurakage, which means Shadow Eater, a weapon capable of killing the Ancients. So Hoji sticks with him. Unfortunately, Wang is being sent to Mizuyaki by Zilla to get the sword by any means necessary, resulting in a rather messy negotiation. Despite all that, Wang is captured and held hostage until...
What's happening?
I don't know.
No, I need more time. Everything is under control. This is too soon.
Wang is sedated and put in a cage overnight while all hell literally breaks loose. Wang makes a reference to the classic game.
Sword. For when you want to make it personal.
Grabs a gun and sets off to find the sword, only to run into a burning building and nearly die. Mizuyaki's dead, the sword is gone, and Wang is passing out, so Hoji offers to save him, since they both really need that sword.
Come on, A like asshole, C like champion.
I accept.
That's the spirit.
Wang's forced to accept, and Hoji bonds with him, granting him access to the powers of Chi energy. Together, their plan is to find the sword and stop Enra from destroying the world with his demon army. Unfortunately, that's all I can tell you without spoiling the really good shit. The best parts of the story are revealed as you uncover Hoji's backstory, which is a surprisingly well-written divine tragedy about love, betrayal, disfigurement, and memory loss. There are very few games with endings that have made me cry, and this is one of them. Even if you don't play the game yourself, I would recommend looking up a playthrough just to experience this story. The gameplay is pretty good for the year it came out, particularly the movement. There were games that had fast gameplay or unique aspects to their player movement, like Rot 2013, Bulletstorm, Fear, and Bioshock Infinite, I guess. But they were still far from being the norm, with COD holding strong as #1 at the time. Wang has a pretty fast movement speed, and a dash that pulls from limited stamina, but you won't really notice as long as you space them out. Dashing is a good choice for a game where you play as a ninja, but I'd like to point out that it wasn't a common movement tool yet, so Shadow Warrior was ahead of the times with this one. With the dash, you can dodge projectiles, reposition yourself, and avoid enemy attacks. You can also hold the dash button to sprint, but that's kind of a waste since you have limited stamina and go farther faster by dashing than you do by sprinting. If you dash on certain parts of the environment, you can also send yourself flying in various ways, since the game is still half Eurojank. I feel like speedrunners would probably get a kick out of exploiting this. The controls you see in the footage are not the defaults. I rebound most of the keys because otherwise they're very uncomfortable and defy all muscle memory I have of other games. I usually rebind my keys anyway because I find default buttons on PC games to be uncomfortable most of the time. But Shadow Warrior's controls are even strange on console. The one thing, your left trigger on console isn't for aiming down sights, that's reserved for weapon features that I'll talk about later. You press the right joystick to aim because nothing's better than drifting your crosshair in a random direction because your thumb slipped while you were trying to hone in on a fast-moving target in a high-stress environment. This control scheme used to be pretty common, and I'm very glad we don't do this anymore. Luckily, the auto-aim in the console version follows enemy heads like a fucking magnet, which helps avoid this issue, but it's not infallible. Levels are mostly linear, with big, beautiful set pieces, or have exploration-based puzzles leading up to a set piece of some kind. In between the chaotic combat encounters, you have these moments of exposition where you get a breather from the action, and the characters reflect on the events of the story. It's in these segments when the atmosphere really gets to soak in. I remember going into the dense bamboo forest for the first time. Foliage so thick it blots out the bright sun in the previous area. Strange noises echo through the darkness surrounding you while the music grows more foreboding and eerie. I went from confidently hacking demons apart in the sunshine to watching my back for what might jump out at me from the darkness. It's very cinematic. Despite the game's age, it still looks incredible to me. People are often too critical about graphics, and I'm sure somebody thinks this game looks bad, but this dumb action shooter has a unique beauty about it when you stop and take it all in. A big part of how good this game looks comes down to the lighting. There's a moment where a demon rounds a corner, knocking over a lantern, and that's when I noticed most of the lighting was dynamic, kind of like Fear, but with more detailed maps. The music is a mixed bag. The main theme is really good. Moment of Calm, Incompatible Feelings, and Awakening are a few standouts I actually listen to regularly. Journey Back Home has this vocal segment I really like that doesn't really show up in the game, I think. But the rest kind of blend together. A lot of Shadow Warrior's combat music is sporadic drum beats and haunting notes from old Chinese instruments. That works pretty well in context, but otherwise they aren't worth adding to any of your playlists, unless you're really into that stuff. The weapons are decent, most of them serve their purpose, but a few of them start out kind of bad. You may notice that when your katana is equipped, you can throw shurikens with the same button that lets you quick slash when you're holding your gun. You probably won't use these very often, or shouldn't, rather. They drain stamina, and they barely tickle anything above a lesser demon, while being as reliably accurate as a drunk pissing up wind. Melee combat, on the other hand, is some of the best I've experienced. Slicing demons with the katana is so satisfying, with the dismemberment mechanics and borderline cartoonish amounts of blood that come from your enemies. You have light swings that you can spam, or you can charge a heavy attack for extra damage. As you go along, you'll learn more powerful moves like a forward stab, a 360 spin, or sending out a wave of chi from your sword that cuts enemies in half. These moves and your chi powers activate by pressing a directional button twice, depending on what move you're trying to do, and then holding your primary fire for katana attacks or your alt fire for chi abilities. This is as awkward as it sounds, but it's easier to get used to on PC than on console since directional movement is a button. I had a much tougher time doing this with joysticks. Your first weapon is the katana, of course, useful all the way through the game if you build Wang correctly. Yes, I said build. We'll get to that too. The second weapon you get is a revolver, which holds 8 rounds instead of the standard 6. It's got a nice punch to it and takes down lesser demons in a few shots. When you kill lesser demons, sometimes they drop a demon heart. It's supposed to kill all enemies on screen, but usually only gets a couple of them. The submachine gun feels a little underpowered at the start, but it's still good for softening up large groups of targets, and gets way better as you upgrade it. Wang has a repeating crossbow, which is just a worse pistol. The projectiles have an arc, and you can pick up spent bolts, so it's a good last resort weapon until you get the upgrade. Ooh, it's good. You have this fun-to-use but gross-looking shotgun with a wide spread. Your high mobility helps negate its short range. After that, you get a weak flamethrower that becomes a very valuable crowd control weapon once you get the firebomb upgrade. And the last weapon you get is a rocket launcher, which despite doing the most damage is my least favorite weapon in the game. The rockets are slow, very slow. But you can give it mini-nuke warheads, so learn to use it. It's very useful later in the game. All your weapons have 3 upgrades you can purchase with the money you collect throughout the levels, except the katana. That gets stronger as you go along. The first 2 upgrades are normally small stat increases, with the third being the most expensive upgrade, adding an additional function to the weapon. Make your pistol more accurate, boost its fire rate. Not enough hand cannon for you? Buy the rapid fire upgrade so you can fan the hammer. One SMG not getting the job done? Get the dual wield upgrade and whip out a second one. Give the crossbow remotely detonated explosive heads. Make that abomination of a shotgun uglier by giving it 4 barrels and then a button that fires all those barrels at once. Touching on that thing I said where you can build Wang a certain way, he comes with a set of skills you can upgrade by gaining XP, referred to as karma. You gain karma by killing enemies or drinking blood from demonic shrines, which is pretty fucking metal. You use karma points to learn power moves for your katana and can upgrade some of your other stats like max health, stamina. If you invest a couple karma points into Headhunter, you get to use demon heads that drop from these big guys called warlords. And once you get the second upgrade that buffs them, well... Yeah, it gets pretty ridiculous, but it's fun. You can also learn and upgrade chi abilities by finding chi crystals. I usually max out healing and the shield. I find myself not using the other ones that often, but they add variety if you're willing to spend points on them. You'll find some of these crystals and karma shrines along your path, but a few are hidden as secrets in the levels, of which this game has many. Secret statues, secret altars, assets from the old game, and fortune cookies. I love how they restore 5% health too, it's a nice touch. This game even has a secret mini-boss. Ladies and gentlemen, the Bunny Lord! Every time you kill a bunny, there's a small chance they could reveal themselves to be one of these bastards. You'll know when they spawn because that heavy metal song you hear is their theme music. They're fast and they teleport behind you if you run away from them. My advice is to check your fire around rabbits and watch your back if you suddenly hear boss music. But what's the point of all these weapons and skills and fancy katana moves if there's nothing to use them on? Let's talk about enemies. I'll only be going over the demon enemies here because the human enemies barely show up and are little more than man with sword, man with gun, and man with sword or gun, but slightly more health this time. The first demon enemy you're introduced to is the Crawler, low-level fodder that'll rush you with melee attacks, but they have some pretty interesting AI. They'll dodge your shots by rolling out of the way and jumping off walls or trees, climb over objects in the environment, and even cower and run away if you're kicking their asses too hard. If you dismember them, they'll grab the bleeding stump and panic. Cut off a leg, they'll crawl after you and slash at your ankles. I didn't manage to capture it, but once I saw the injured ones fall back and regroup, like they actually have an idea of tactics. The way they interact with the player in the environments makes them feel alive, and it really impresses me how much work went into their behavior. Most of the demons in the game have a rage mode of some kind, which buffs them in a certain way, or acts as an ability they can call upon at random. In the Crawler's case, it makes them faster and more aggressive, but wears off after a few seconds. Birdmen are the game's first ranged enemy. They throw easy-to-dodge projectiles and attempt to melee you if you get too close. Despite the name, not all of them can fly. The ones that don't fly try to stay at a safe distance and pelt you with attacks. Rage lets them throw volleys of attacks quicker, which can be a problem if there's more than one doing it. The ones that can fly have less health and sometimes turn into a homing bomb when you shoot them, so watch out for that. The Warlord is technically the next enemy you're introduced to, but he appears as a mini-boss and doesn't become common until later. He's a big bullet sponge who can enrage nearby demons and throw waves of fire at you if you're not in melee range. He can use this tether thing to pull you in, which freezes you in place and shakes your screen around a bit first. You can still shoot while he does this, so take advantage of that. When you get to the city, you meet these guys. I called them witch doctors the first time I saw them because they have a tribal aesthetic to their clothes and spears that launch exploding skulls at you. The game wants you to shoot them through the hole in their shield, but you can walk around them faster than they can turn. If you break their shield, they'll switch to melee, but they're pretty slow. They can also rage, which buffs their damage a bit. In the late game, you get a new variant of them that goes straight to melee, but some carry smaller shields, making them a bit easier to deal with. They also have an attack that'll shake your screen and slow your move speed instead of shooting skulls at you, so they're a priority target if there's nothing bigger around. You should have the shotgun by the time they become a regular occurrence, so be sure to shove it up their ass when you see them. Also, they can't block fire. When I started writing this segment, I realized I didn't actually know what these guys were called, and after a quick Google search, I learned that apparently they're trolls? What the fuck? The Shadow Warrior wiki had some pictures so I could finally get a good view of them, and they look like Japanese Oni. The wiki also says this. Flying Wild Hog is a Polish company, so maybe they wanted to sprinkle some Slavic lore in there, but then why make it look like a Japanese demon? A troll and an Oni are two very different things. Once you get to the cemetery level, you're attacked by skeletons. These guys don't have a name in this game, but in the second game they're called Boneheads, so I'll be calling them Boneheads. They're weaker crawlers, but more importantly an extension of the next enemy you encounter, the Shaman. Shamans aren't as tough as Warlords, on paper at least, but they're still a pain on their own. Not quite difficult, more just annoying. This guy will fire projectiles that emit poison gas wherever they land, summon boneheads in groups, and do big sweeping melee attacks if you get too close. He'll resurrect enemies and randomly spawns an invincibility bubble around himself, which also spawns a horde of boneheads you have to kill before he'll fight you again, which makes fighting him take stupidly long. Leading up to your first shaman encounter, you may have noticed some of the crawlers and boneheads have a barrel on their shoulder, but it doesn't explode. From what I can tell, there's a chance the auto-aim will lock onto the barrel instead of the head. It doesn't really do it on the PC version, which I'm using for footage, but on the Xbox version, that would happen to me a lot, since the control scheme heavily relied on auto-aim to get precise shots. I feel like I heard once in school that Chinese soldiers would mount a barrel to their armor so it looked like they had two heads from a distance, as a way to scare the enemy or confuse archers trying to land an arrow in their face. I couldn't find any historical accounts or folklore that supports this information, however, so this is really just a tangent that I am most likely wrong about and probably imagined. Easily the most disturbing and overused enemy in the game is the Mother, bulbous goat demon things with fetuses attached to them. They explode on death and can summon a rolling bomb that follows you until you shoot it. They also have a rage mode where they turn themselves into a rolling explosive which is much faster. After your first encounter with them, levels will have these bombs sprinkled about as level hazards. Some home in, some don't. A couple sections consist of nothing but these fucking things coming at you in close quarters, and they are easily the worst parts of the game. There's a segment in Chapter 12 where you have to wear a gas mask that covers half of your screen, walk into smoke that restricts your vision, and fight a horde of these things in the dark. I fucking hate it. The gas mask and these body horror hellgoats. You got the Warper coming in second to last, demon hags that can turn invisible. They come in two flavors. You meet the ones that dual wield katanas first, and they are a huge fucking threat. They teleport and do a lot of damage. Way later, you encounter the much less threatening Shuriken variant. They usually turn invisible and run away instead of teleporting, and do piddly shit damage from a distance. I usually kill them on accident. When I'm actively trying to kill them, I use the flamethrower for obvious reasons, but if you don't have it yet, the shotgun works just fine. Our final non-boss opponent is easily the most difficult, especially once they start throwing him in with other large enemies. It's the Berserker. He's got a ton of health and can only be damaged by shooting the glowing weak spot on his back. You have to bait him into charging and dash around him. If you don't do it at just the right moment, though, he'll just skid and turn around instead of exposing his juicy bits for you to explode all over. He's kind of like a Pinky from Doom, only much, much worse. This is usually a job for the panic button on your shotgun or the rocket launcher if you can aim projectiles better than I can. The bosses are a spectacle to behold. Zilla excluded. Gozu, Mezu, and Zing the Ancients are all boss fights, but they're not the human-sized beings you see in the animated cutscenes. Oh no. Hoji made them all mech suits before he was banished, because apparently he's a frickin' engineer blacksmith first and a trickster god second. Gozu is first up and the weakest of them naturally. He introduces the mechanics of the boss fights more than anything, but he's still fun to fight. Shoot the glowing spots to expose a crystal, shoot the crystal to lower the boss's health. Later fights will incorporate some other mechanics to keep it interesting, but that's usually how you deal with the boss itself. Next up is Mezu, the guardian of the gates between the human world and the Shadow Realm. This boss fight's gimmick is that you try to open the gate he's protecting so he comes closer instead of attacking you from a distance. Then you destroy his wings to keep him grounded and finish him off. After he's on the ground, it's a lot like fighting Gozu, but he has his own tricks up his sleeve. After that, you fight Zilla twice. Not back to back, but he is the next two bosses. Surprisingly, Zilla isn't in a mech suit for either of these fights. The reason Wang was sent after the sword in the first place is because Zilla made a pact with Enra. Zilla would help him get the Nobitsu Kage if Enra lets him join the Ancients as a god. He warns Zilla about Wang and Hoji working together, and gives him powers too, just like Hoji did. As a bonus, it fixes his legs in the process. From there, the fight is mainly Zilla turning invisible and Hoji telling you when to turn around and wail on them. These fights are katana only because Zilla refuses to show himself unless you have it out. The next fight with him is more of the same, but it has a really cool set piece. Like, damn. That is beautiful. Oh yeah, and you cut off Zilla's arm the second time around, so that's pretty cool.
Alright, motherfuckers. Who wants some Wang?
Zing is the last boss, and he's my favorite. To put it into context, he was Enra's general, until Gozu beheaded him for reasons that sort of dip into spoiler territory. Look, just know that Hoji tricked him into doing something bad, and it didn't end well for either of them, considering Hoji got banished, and Zing is now stuck as a still living severed head, because Ancients can't fully die. It's pretty complicated. When you fight him, Enra is controlling his body as a weapon. It's the final stretch of the game. You have the Nobitsu Kage in your hands, and it can cast chi waves with the primary fire button apparently, which is pretty damn cool. You're basically sieging Enra's temple as a one-wing army at this point, cleaving your way through demons coming at you, and at the top of the hill, Zing's body is raining down flaming arrows. Once you reach the top of the hill, it's like the two other boss fights, hitting weak points and crystals, but you're fighting this colossal suit of armor as an equal instead of an annoyance. After the first phase, the body comes back and you have to avoid getting sucked in by it while destroying the crystal in its chest mouth. Phase 3, you destroy the last few crystals left in the armor inside this huge arena and permanently put him down for good with the power of a badass magic sword. And don't worry, Zing's fine with it. His request, actually.
And if you see my body, do me the favor of hacking it to bits.
Will do.
This game is a hidden gem, for sure. And I'd recommend it to anybody who likes first-person shooters. Fans of the original Shadow Warrior may not like it, since it's just using the title and the character names without being an exact successor, but it still pays homage to the old game in a lot of ways. Something you should understand about this game before playing it is that this is not a retro-style FPS. That genre wouldn't really exist for another 3 years outside of ROT 2013. Shadow Warrior isn't trying to be a retro FPS game, so judging it as one is kinda dumb. This is a playable action movie. That's why you see lens flares catching on Wang's sunglasses. That's why every car, scooter, vending machine, and air conditioner fucking explodes. The classic game was based on John Woo films and kung fu movies of the time, and this game continues that tradition, bringing themes from more action movies into the fold as part of its motif. The part where Wang talks to Miyazaki reminds me of Kill Bill a lot, and also references Pulp Fiction with the briefcase emitting a golden glow, along with a myriad of other movie references thrown in there. I think this game is great, and despite not quite being a retro FPS throwback like some people may want it to be, I made this video because I still think it has an important place in gaming history, leading up to Doom's supremacy and the following renaissance of throwback games we find ourselves in currently. It deserves to be recognized as a precursor to Doom like ROT 2013 was, even if it doesn't quite hit the same marks. And furthermore, it's just flat out fun. I had a great time all the way through, except for the parts where there were a ton of mothers spawning everywhere, but that's besides the point. By and large, this game is still pretty damn good, and I think it deserves a lot more recognition today than it gets. But wait a minute. Crawlers interact with the environment like imps. There are shielded enemies, Barons and Warlords are nearly identical in their attacks. And you know what? Berserkers are just like Pinkies. Wow, Doom 2016 stole so much from this game. I give Shadow Warrior an 8 out of 10. Hi there, this is post-script recording Gaza, here with a bit of an announcement. As far as content goes on this channel, I'm going to be doing this series, Easy Mode. I'm thinking of doing VR reviews because VR games often have more streamlined or just less content in general, and are a bit easier to make videos on. Those will probably be the short, quick-fire videos that are easy to make. Easy Mode is going to be the series that I have to invest a bit more time and effort into, of course. This is not confirmed yet, but I am thinking of making an abridged series on a channel that me and my friends started a while ago that we haven't really done anything with. If anyone is really watching this crap that I put out, look forward to that, I suppose. Thank you for making it this far into the video. All right, bye.